Julia Mackenzie stared at the empty cereal bowl in the sink. The cornflakes had dried into a beige crust around the rim, untouched since Tuesday morning. 5 days now. 5 days since Lara had disappeared. Outside, October rain pelted against the kitchen window of their suburban Boston home, creating rivulets that distorted the view of their backyard. The swing set they should have dismantled years ago stood abandoned, its chains rusting, creaking softly in the autumn wind. It was the kind of dreary Tuesday morning when teenagers complained about getting out of bed, not the kind when they vanished without a trace. "I made some coffee," Marcello said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. He placed a steaming mug on the counter beside her, his wedding band clinking against the ceramic. The sound startled Julia, breaking her trance. "Thanks," she whispered, not reaching for it. Her husband's Brazilian accent, usually barely perceptible after 23 years in the States, had returned with a vengeance since Lara disappeared, thickening with each passing day of stress. He hadn't shaved, and the silver in his beard seemed to have multiplied overnight. "Detective Brennan called while you were in the shower," he said, leaning against the counter. "They're expanding the search radius today, bringing in some volunteers from the neighboring counties." Julia nodded, her gaze drifting to the refrigerator door where Lara's senior portrait was held by a magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower, a souvenir from the family vacation they took when Lara was 14. In the photo, her daughter's smile revealed the slight gap between her front teeth that she'd always been self-conscious about. Her dark hair, inherited from Marcello, was pulled back in a neat ponytail, contrasting with Julia's own blonde waves. "Did they find anything at the school?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. If they had, Marcello wouldn't have started the conversation with coffee. "Nothing new. They're reviewing more security footage from the businesses around the route she would have taken." The conversation felt rehearsed, mechanical. They'd had variations of it numerous times over the past 5 days. The police had already interviewed Lara's friends, her teachers, her co-workers at the mall where she worked weekends. They'd traced her phone, found in her bedroom charging, checked her social media accounts, nothing unusual, and examined her laptop, password protected now with digital forensics. Lara had simply vanished somewhere between leaving for school and arriving there. Her attendance had been marked absent in first-period calculus, but neither Julia nor Marcello had received the automated notification, a technical glitch that had cost them precious hours. "I'm going to go through her room again," Julia said, finally picking up the coffee mug. "There has to be something we missed." Marcello's eyes, bloodshot and sunken, met hers. "Julia, the police already—" "I know what the police did," she snapped, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry. I need to do something. I can't sit here another minute watching the rain and waiting for the phone to ring." He nodded, understanding. "I'll come with you." Lara's bedroom was exactly as she'd left it, a fact that both comforted and terrified Julia. The unmade bed with its constellation-patterned comforter, the desk cluttered with college brochures and AP study guides, the corkboard covered with photos of friends, movie ticket stubs, and a schedule for the Boston Symphony Orchestra where Lara played viola in a youth program. They'd been in here countless times since Tuesday, both with the police and alone, searching for any clue, any hint of what might have happened. But now, with the house silent except for the tapping of rain against the window, Julia approached her daughter's space with renewed determination. "Let's be systematic," Marcello said, his engineering mindset taking over. "I'll check the desk and bookshelf. You take the closet and under the bed." Julia knelt beside the bed, running her hand along the carpet underneath. Her fingers found only dust bunnies and a lone sock. The closet yielded nothing they hadn't already seen. Clothes neatly organized by type and color. Lara had always been meticulous. Shoes lined up on a rack, and a plastic storage bin containing old school projects. As Julia was about to close the closet door, her eyes caught on the top shelf where several board games were stacked. Monopoly, Scrabble, a chess set, and a faded box of Trivial Pursuit that had belonged to Marcello's parents. They hadn't played these games in years. Something nagged at her. The games were dusty, untouched, except for the Trivial Pursuit box, which sat slightly askew compared to the others. Standing on tiptoes, Julia reached for the box and carefully brought it down. It felt lighter than it should have. "Marcello!" she called, setting the box on Lara's bed. "Look at this." He joined her as she removed the lid. Instead of the game board and cards, inside was a leather-bound notebook with a simple embossed L on the cover. "A diary," Marcello breathed. Julia's heart pounded as she lifted the book from the box. It was solid, substantial, clearly used. How had they missed this? How had the police missed this? "Should we—" Julia's voice trailed off. Marcello ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "If there's any chance, it tells us where she is. Or what happened." They sat side by side on Lara's bed, the diary between them like a living thing. Julia felt like an intruder, about to violate the sacred privacy between parent and child. But then she remembered the cereal bowl in the sink, the empty seat at the dinner table, the voicemails she'd left that would never be returned. With trembling fingers, she opened the diary. The first entry was dated August 15th, the beginning of Lara's senior year. The handwriting was neat, controlled, so familiar that Julia could hear her daughter's voice in her head as she read, "First day of senior year complete. Ms. Abernathy already assigned a 5-page paper on Thoreau. Devon got his braces off and suddenly thinks he's Brad Pitt. Mia and Zach finally broke up, thank God. The drama was exhausting everyone. Orchestra auditions are next week. I'm going for first chair, even though Sophie will probably get it again." Julia and Marcello exchanged glances. It was so utterly normal, so completely Lara, that Julia felt tears spring to her eyes. They continued reading, skimming through entries about college applications, orchestra rehearsals, fights with friends that seemed earth-shattering one day and were forgotten the next. There were mentions of a boy named Connor that they had never heard of before, descriptions of parties they hadn't known she attended, complaints about Julia and Marcello that stung despite their triviality. Page after page revealed the inner life of their daughter, a life adjacent to but separate from the one they shared with her. Julia realized with a pang how much of Lara had become hidden from them, not through deception but through the natural process of growing up. And then they reached page 47. The handwriting changed, still Lara's, but rushed, pressed harder into the paper, some words underlined multiple times. "I don't know who to tell, or if I should tell anyone. I don't even know if what I remember is real, or if my mind is playing tricks on me. After Tyler's party on Friday, there are chunks of time I can't account for. I only had 2 beers, I swear, but there's a gap between leaving the party and waking up on the bench at Franklin Park. My jacket was missing, my keys were in the wrong pocket, and that bruise on my arm. Connor says I seemed fine when I left with him and Eli. Says he offered to drive me home, but I insisted on walking because I needed air. Why would I do that? It was freezing. And why can't I remember? Worse, I feel like someone's watching me now. At school, at orchestra, even at work. Yesterday at the mall, I saw the same man 3 different times. He never bought anything, just browsed. When our eyes met the 3rd time, he smiled like he knew me. I'm scared to tell Mom and Dad. They'll freak out and call the police. And what if I'm just being paranoid? What if nothing happened and I just drank more than I realized? They already worry so much, Dad with his heart condition and Mom trying to hide how stressed she is about the layoffs at her firm. But if something did happen, if someone did do something to me, I need to figure it out myself first. I need to remember. P.S. I'm going to talk to Eli tomorrow after orchestra. Connor says Eli walked with us part way, but then headed to his girlfriend's place. Maybe he saw something I didn't. Julia felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Marcello, who had gone completely still, his jaw clenched so tight she could see a muscle twitching beneath his skin. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Marcello, did you know about any of this? A party? This Connor, someone following her?" He shook his head. His expression haunted. "Nothing. She said she was studying at Mia's house that Friday." He flipped to the next page with trembling fingers, but it was blank. The entry on page 47 was the last one Lara had written. The implications crashed over Julia like a wave. Their daughter had been afraid, had possibly been drugged, had been followed, and instead of coming to them, she'd hidden her fears away in a diary and tried to investigate on her own. And now, she was gone. "We need to call Detective Brennan," Marcello said, already reaching for his phone. "And we need to find out who Connor and Eli are." Julia clutched the diary to her chest, her mind racing. The cereal bowl in the sink, the college brochures on the desk, the diary hidden in a game box, all pieces of a puzzle they hadn't known they were solving until now. "She didn't just disappear," Julia said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "Something happened to her. Someone took her." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. But inside Lara's room, the silence of realization was deafening. Their daughter's life had veered into darkness days before she physically vanished, and they hadn't seen it happening. As Marcello spoke urgently to Detective Brennan on the phone, Julia turned back to page 47, searching for any detail they might have missed. The party, the gap in memory, the strange man at the mall, the bruise on her arm, and the two names that might lead them to Lara, Connor and Eli. For the first time in 5 days, they had something to follow. It wasn't hope, not exactly, but it was movement in the terrible stillness that had enveloped them since Tuesday morning, when their daughter walked out the door and into the void. Detective Brennan's office felt colder than the October rain outside. Julia clutched her coffee cup with both hands, the warmth doing little to stop her trembling. Marcello sat beside her, his posture rigid as they faced the detective across her desk. "We've brought Connor Williams and Eli Tanner in for questioning," Brennan said, her voice measured. The fluorescent lights highlighted the exhaustion on her face. "Connor confirmed they were with Lara at Tyler Russo's party that night, but insists she was fine when she left." "And you believe him?" Marcello's question came out sharper than intended. Brennan tapped her pen against her notepad. "We're verifying his story against other witnesses. Eli's account differs slightly. Says Lara seemed disoriented when they left. He thought she was just tired." Julia leaned forward. "What about the man she mentioned, the one following her at the mall?" "We've reviewed security footage from the dates in Lara's diary. There's a man who appears in several frames near where she worked, never interacting, just present." Brennan slid a grainy photo across the desk. "We're trying to identify him." The image showed a middle-aged man in a grey jacket, face partially obscured by a baseball cap. Nothing remarkable about him, yet something in his stance, the way he angled toward the camera, sent chills through Julia. "There's more," Brennan continued. "We've been investigating Tyler Russo's family. His father, Anthony Russo, is a real estate developer with some questionable connections. 3 months ago, another girl reported feeling drugged at a gathering at their home. She didn't pursue charges." Marcello's head snapped up. "And you're only connecting this now? The cases appeared unrelated until your daughter's diary gave us reason to look deeper." Brennan's tone remained professional, but Julia detected a hint of defensiveness. "We've obtained a warrant to search the Russo property." Julia clutched the paper cup so tightly it crumpled, spilling lukewarm coffee onto her hands. She barely noticed. "What about Lara's phone records?" she asked, wiping her hands mechanically on her jeans. "That's where things get interesting," Brennan said. "In the week before she disappeared, she received multiple calls from a burner phone. We've traced it to a convenience store in Cambridge. The owner remembers selling it to a man matching our mall suspect's description." The pieces were aligning, forming a picture Julia wasn't sure she could bear to see clearly. The Russo estate sprawled across 2 acres in Brookline, a stone mansion set back from the road behind wrought iron gates. Julia and Marcello watched from their car as police vehicles lined the street and officers moved methodically through the property. "We shouldn't be here," Marcello said, though he made no move to start the engine. "I couldn't sit at home waiting for another phone call," Julia replied. Hours passed. The rain stopped. Shadows lengthened across the manicured lawn. And then, movement. Officers escorting a handcuffed Anthony Russo to a waiting police car. Behind him, his son Tyler, not in handcuffs but flanked by officers. Julia's phone rang. Detective Brennan. "Mrs. Mackenzie, we've found something. Not Lara," she added quickly, "but evidence. I can't share details yet, but we're expanding our search to a property in New Hampshire owned by the Russos." "What kind of evidence?" Julia demanded. A pause. "Photos, a hidden room, and your daughter wasn't the first." The cabin in the White Mountains appeared deserted when the police convoy arrived at dawn. Frost covered the ground, crunching under their feet as officers approached with weapons drawn. Julia and Marcello, against all protocols and Brennan's explicit instructions, had followed at a distance. They remained in their car now, breath fogging the windows as they watched the scene unfold like a silent film. The tactical team breached the door. Minutes stretched like hours, and then a flurry of activity. Radios crackled. More officers rushed inside. Marcello gripped Julia's hand so tightly her fingers went numb. The cabin door opened again. 2 officers emerged, supporting between them a thin figure wrapped in an emergency blanket. Dark hair, unsteady steps. "Lara," Julia whispered, and then she was out of the car, running, Marcello right behind her. Their daughter looked up, her face pale and drawn, a small cut above her eyebrow. For a moment her expression remained blank, and then recognition flooded her eyes. "Mom? Dad?" Her voice was hoarse, disbelieving. They reached her just as her knees buckled. Together they caught her, arms encircling her too thin frame as they sank to the frozen ground. "You found me," Lara whispered against Julia's shoulder. "How did you find me?" "Your diary," Marcello said, his voice breaking. Page 47. Later they would learn the full story. How Anthony Russo had used his son's parties to identify vulnerable targets. How the family's security consultant, the man from the mall, had been watching Lara for weeks. How a network of powerful men had protected each other's secrets for years. Later they would face the long road of healing, of therapy and court testimonies and rebuilding trust. But in that moment on the frozen ground outside a cabin in the mountains, they held on to what they had almost lost, their daughter, returned from the void. 1 month later, Julia sat at the kitchen table. A different diary opened before her. This one had been Brennan's suggestion, a way for all of them to process, to record the journey back to something resembling normal. Marcello entered, setting down a mug beside her. "How is she?" "Sleeping," Julia said. "The new medication seems to help with the nightmares." She looked toward Lara's bedroom. A door now perpetually ajar by mutual agreement. Inside, their daughter slept, not peacefully, not yet, but present. Home. Other girls had been rescued in the days following Lara's return. The Russo network had crumbled. Prominent names exposed, arrests continuing, a scandal that reached into city halls and courthouses across New England. "She's going back to orchestra next week," Julia said, reaching for Marcello's hand, just to watch at first. A small step, one of many they would take together. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the yard in pristine white. The old swing set stood silhouetted against the gathering dusk, no longer abandoned, but waiting. Julia turned to a blank page in the new diary. Page 47, coincidentally. She hesitated only briefly before beginning to write. "Today marks 1 month since we found her, since she found her way back to us. The road ahead is long, but we're walking it together, step by step." The words flowed, not erasing what had happened, but charting a path forward. Through truth, through pain, toward healing, 1 page at a time.